Hello my friends, and a very warm welcome back to my painting channel. And in this video we are going to be painting this amazing looking droid. This is from the Cassian Andor box set, so this is from Star Wars Legion, and this is K-2SO. I've got to remember to get that right because it's quite easy to get those numbers and letters mixed up. Now, this is a model that is quite grey, so we're going to start by using a tenebrous grey, and we're going to paint this quite dark to begin with. And then what we're going to do is we're going to slowly build up a lot of these grey colours and add a little bit of blue tones and things like that, so that it breaks up the sort of monotone grey sort of colouring. And we're actually going to build up a little bit more colour and a little bit more contrast to it, which will create a little bit more character and bring the character a little bit more to life, hopefully. So stick with us and we're going to build our way through it. So, as I say, we're going to start off by using a tenebrous grey, which is a nice dark grey base tone. This is a paint from AK Interactive. Now, if you don't have this paint, you could use a black. That would work equally fine. Tenebrous grey is very dark. The only slight difference is this is a very dark blue grey. So it doesn't have the black tinge to it, but it does have this light, very sort of small bluish sort of tone, which is kind of what we're looking for because this is something that we're going to kind of want to build up from. So as you can see, I'm just covering all of the model in one flat, nice smooth base coat, a nice thin paint as well, because you don't want to overdo it and lose any of the details on your model. Now once that is dry, we're then going to move on and we're going to use ash grey. And ash grey is another one from the AK Interactive, and this is a nice dark grey colour. And that's all I'm going to do with this ash grey. So I'm going to build this around the arm areas. You can see these sort of panels that are just sticking out in the rounded areas of the arms. I'm just going to paint this just inside there. The reason why I'm painting this early is because if we make any mistakes, it's easy to fix, but it's also something that we don't have to worry about making mistakes on later on when we've done all of the hard work on the panels and the colours and all things like that. So I'm just going to paint these parts grey, and also a little bit on the inside of his body, little bits and details just on the inside, just so that it breaks up, as I say, a lot of those sort of monotone, sort of one-tone greys as well. It's just trying to make a little bit more contrast and a little bit more interest in the character himself. So just painting all around those arm areas, like I say, trying to be careful, but it doesn't matter if you make any mistakes, because at this stage, we're right at the beginning, so it's very easy to fix as well. And there you go, you can see just adding a little bit around the chest area, just around the details. And then once that's dry, we're going to use an Avalanche Sunset. This is a Citadel colour. This is one of my favourite yellows when I paint. This as a yellow is a very good base yellow, because this takes to miniatures really well. Normally yellow is quite tough to get onto miniatures. It takes multiple layers and coats and things to build the vibrancy. But with Avalanche Sunset, it just seems to be that perfect sort of consistency to be able to use as a base tone yellow. So we're just going to go around the very edge. You can see there's this light sort of thin ring just on the inside of those arms. We're just going to try to be as careful as possible painting the yellow in. Again, if we make mistakes, we can fix this nice and early. That's why we're doing this nice and early as well. We're trying to get this on the model nice and straightforward, nice and early, so that we can build up from here without worrying too much. If you have made any mistakes, you can always go back and reuse that ash grey just to fix things up a little, so that it doesn't matter too much. Once that's done, then we're going to use a gunmetal. This is a great dark silver colour. This is a alternative to using lead belcher from Citadel. So if you do prefer using your Citadel colours, lead belcher for this would be a perfect alternative. And that's all we're going to do is just paint all of those connecting joints, all things like the elbows, the knees, the wrists. We're just going to paint all of these using this dark silver colour. And this is going to be a great base that we get, like I say, that contrast between some of the light areas, some of the dark areas, and just breaking up all of that greys and things like that as well, that monotone colouring. I've done a little bit of research on looking at a lot of different photos and pictures and screenshots and things like that from the robot, so from this droid in action. So I'm trying to match all of the colours as close as I can, but at the same time I'm trying to make sure that I have my own little spin and my own little twist on it, just so that it makes things just a little bit more interesting, because we don't want everything to be exact, perfect and all things like that. So I'm also going to paint this just around the face, just around the mouth area here. And as you know on the channel, I like to use different paints and different paint brands and things like that. We like to mix things up and go a little bit crazy and just sort of do a few different things. So yeah, just painting around the mouth guard, the kind of area where he uses to speak. And once everything is dry, we're then going to use a dark wash. This is just a black wash from Vallejo. This is a great colour for toning down a lot of sort of base colour. So when you place this on a model, it does darken things down quite nicely. And what we're going to do with this is, instead of covering the whole miniature in this, we're going to use this as more of a pin wash, which means we're going to use this in a very, very controlled fashion. So that's all we're going to do, is we're going to place this across all of those silver points, because this is really going to darken those silver bits down and combine and sort of connect those colours together with the base coats, the greys and things like that we've got. So we don't want that sort of silver to really stand off the model too much, not just yet anyway. This is something that's going to tie in all of those colours and create a little bit of depth and contrast between some of the darker shaded areas and some of the lighter tones that will stick out. I'm also going around the areas under the arms, so the yellow and grey areas that we've already built. And again, this is all about tying those colours together. So by placing the wash on those, the black is going to sit into those recess points, and that's going to allow those colours to sort of blend together and fix any tiny little mistakes and just sort of tie everything together quite nicely and quite evenly. You can really see it starting to work just here under the arm, and you can see those colours really sort of coming together, and it really does tie that yellow and grey to the base colour that we've used. Now once all of that's dry, we're then going to use a German grey from Vallejo. This again is a nice sort of blue-grey colour. This has a really nice tone to it. It is a dark blue-grey, but it does just have that very subtle, very light sort of blue hint to it as well. And you'll see that as I place it onto the miniature. Don't worry too much, because it will appear lighter on the miniature to begin with, and it will dry down a little bit darker, especially with that dark undercoat that we've used. Now I've thinned this paint down quite nicely, so I've thinned this down to about 4 or 5 parts water to 1 part paint, just so that this creates a nice glaze, and this will give me complete control as to the vibrancy that I want this paint to go onto the miniature. So this isn't going to be a thick blob of this colour. This is really thin coats, and this is really thin down, sort of glazing the colour up. So this is giving me control as to where I place my brush strokes and how I want the light of this colour to really pick out the details using those brush strokes as well. So as you can see around the chest area or around the head area, I'm painting more towards the top, but also leaving some of the gaps between the banded bit just around the back of the head, so that this creates that cool contrast that I like to mention in a lot of my videos. This creates that depth and that illusion that there are still some sort of darker areas hanging around in those sort of grooves and things like that. And you'll see I'm just using the brush and the brush strokes to really build up some of those scratches, some of those sort of techniques, and some of the sort of textures and things on the model. This is something that I do quite a lot on the channel. If you've watched me painting before, then you'll see that I use the brush strokes to create the textures that we really want, because not everything in life is a perfectly smooth transition. Sometimes paint chips, paint wears, and you know, if something's been out in the sunlight, it will tarnish and things like that. And this droid of ours isn't directly perfectly straight from the factory, so he's going to have a little bit of tarnishing and a little bit of sort of decoloration and things like that. So that's all going to add to the character and add to the detail of the model as well. It's just showing you a prolonged bit of me just adding this onto all sorts of different areas of the model and just building this up with the brush. You can see as I'm waiting for areas around the chest to dry, then I'm just adding a little bit more so that I can control the amount of vibrance that I get out of this sort of glazing colour. Once that's dry, I'm then going to use a dark blue-grey. So this is a very similar sort of colour. It's actually just a perfect step up from the colour that we've been using. And so all I'm going to do is just stipple a little bit of this on here. This again is very thin, so I'm going to use this again like a glaze. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place a little bit there, and I'm going to use a little bit of water just to kind of blend this through and create this sort of blended highlight just across the top of the chest, so that I can control where I'm expecting the light source. There we go, you can see I'm just removing the excess with the brush there. And this is giving me control as to where the highlights are going to be. So around the chest area, around the head, things like that. I'm just going to place nice thin down areas and nice thin down bits of the paint using a stippling technique, and then using the water then, I'm just going to remove a lot of that and just blend that into highlights and things like that. And it's a really nice sort of wet blend and a really nice style and way of blending colours and lights and highlights together, especially things with grey. You know, things like non-metallic metals, swords and things like that. Using this sort of blend in the water and blending these sort of glazes together and these very, very thin layers will allow you to build the highlights in a really nice, thin, smooth transition. It's a really fun way of painting. It takes a little bit of practice, and not everything's going to be perfect, but it is a really fun way of painting because you do kind of get to manipulate and play about with the paint after you've placed it onto the miniature. As you can see, I'm just doing around the chest there. It's a really, really fun and interesting way of painting, and it can be a really cool way of bringing characters to life as well, especially things like this, as you can see. So again, just using the brush strokes to create all of those textures, and with this very, very fine, thin sort of glaze. You can see I'm going back over areas on the chest because we kind of want the vibrance to stand out a little bit more. Because don't forget, with a watered down paint, this is going to dry down and blend into the model quite nicely, so it's not going to dry down as bright as it first appears. So once we've added all of that onto the model and we've allowed that to dry, I'm then going to use a small amount of Riley Grey. And with this Riley Grey, this now is a lot more blue, so there's a lot more of a blue tone to this. And I'm just going to use this very, very, very sparingly. So I'm going to be very, very conscious and careful as to where I place this. And I'm just going to add a little bit of this. And again, you can see how thin this is, how much of a glaze this is. And this is creating, again, that blue tone, that blue sort of grey colour. And it's just creating that little bit of a cold contrast on the model as well. It's really great when you're painting things that are grey, especially things like droids, robots. Adding that sort of blue tone kind of adds that little cold kind of technique, that sort of cold transition and cold feel to it as well. It's a really great way of sort of building greys and adding a little bit more life to it, but also not overdoing those just flat grey tones and things like that. It also adds, with being in the Star Wars universe, that this is kind of an Imperial grey and a bit of an Imperial blue and things like that, and just adds a little bit more to the story. There you go, you can see just how thin the paint is, and I'm just adding little bits of this as I go on the fly, just kind of areas where I think the light is going to catch onto the model. And then we're going to move on to using another one of the AK Interactive paints. So we're going to use a graphite. This is a nice light mid-tone grey. So this is a really nice sort of flat grey, but it is quite light as well. And that's all I'm going to do, just using the very, very, very tip of the brush. We're just going to go back in over those panels that we painted using the ash grey. But this time we're only going to stick on the very, very top parts of those panels, as you can see. That's really going to bring a little bit of life and a little bit of light into those areas as well. We're going to be selective as to where we place this as well, because we only want this kind of across the top panels. We don't want this across the bottom panels, because that's going to give us the illusion of light catching on those areas of the panels as well. Just like so. There we go, just like so. Just dabbing a little bit with a little bit of a stippling effect. And then I'm also going to use a moon yellow. So this is a nice light vibrant yellow from Vallejo. This is the game color range. And that's all I'm going to do is just gently add a little bit of this yellow on top of the yellow that we've already got. And this now is going to be quite a thin yellow. So this isn't going to be anywhere near as thick as the Avalon Sunset that we used as a base tone. And instead, this is just going to be used on some of the top areas, just to create again that highlight and add that highlight that we've just used with our graphite onto the grey areas as well. It gives you a little bit of control as to where you want to show the light source is coming and just catching onto the model. Then I'm going to move on and use a silver grey. This is a really, really, really great colour, silver grey. This is kind of like an ivory colour from Vallejo, but this is the AK Interactive version, and this is a really, really cool color, especially for doing things like non-metallic metals, because it creates great highlights in a nice even fashion. And that's all I'm going to do is just very, very, very lightly dry brush a very small amount of this just across the blaster pistol that we've got in our hand here, and this is going to create that illusion that there's a highlight just catching across the top area of the weapon, and this is going to keep a lot of that depth of the original dark tone as well. And once all of that is done, that's all of our colours done, that's all of our paints done, we're now going to look at focusing on doing a little bit more of the weathering kind of effect. And what I'm going to do is I'm just using a shining silver from the Army Painter. So you could use a nice light sort of silver tone from any kind of paint, just looking for a nice light, vibrant, shiny kind of silver. And that's all I'm going to do is just using the very, very, very tip of my fine detail brush. So just a size 0, size 1 brush. And that's all I'm going to do is just gently, using that very tip of the brush, just dab a few small dots of silver just across areas where I think some of the paint might have chipped, and then I'm just going to drag very, very, very gently a few small scratches just across, and that's going to create, as I say always, that illusion that this paint chips, scratches, that this robot has had a little bit of a scuffle here and there. You know, he's not fresh out of the factory. He's got some paint chipping, some weathering, some worn down colours. You know, we're starting to look a little bit more like a character now, not just a flat colour and a flat tone. So as you can see, just being very, very gentle, very, very careful, just like so, just dropping a few dots here and there, and also just dragging at the very, very tip of the brush across areas as well, just to create that illusion that the paint has been scraped and scratched and things like that. Just like so. I'm painting that across all different areas, across some of the areas, just across his shoulders as well. Just like so. Nice and simple, nice and simple. It's a great effect, great technique, but it's also so easy to do as well. It's not something that you need to worry too much and spend ages sort of panicking about and fussing about. And because in nature, like I say, quite often not everything is perfect. You don't have to have every dot in the exact right place. It's more a case of adding dots as you go on the fly, and that will create that more natural, more sort of normal kind of look that will be more pleasing on the eye. If everything was perfect, it wouldn't look so good. And there we go. Once you've done all of the weathering, that is everything complete. That is our droid. That is K-2SO all done. And as you can see, here he is, together with Cassian Andor. Both come in the same box set. It's taken me a while to get around to doing the second bit, so I apologise in advance for such a long wait. But now that we're done, it is looking great. As always, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in and for watching. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of this painting, if you liked it, what you thought was great about it, and what you would do differently. I really love to hear from you. As always, my friends, thank you again. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up and take care of yourselves. I will see you all on the next one. Have a good one.